I'm Tracy Sabol. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, pressing for time. As Israel strikes hundreds of targets in Gaza, international leaders call for the protection of civilians and the release of hostages. We have the latest. Back to square one. Two lawmakers failed to grab the gavel, making it week 3 without a House Speaker, and now 9 Republicans are vying for the nomination. Sacramento warning. What a UK bishop has to say about the worldly threat against marriage. And church and state. Pope Francis reminds the faithful who we really belong to. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the Feast of St. John of Capistrano. Our top story tonight, the war in the Middle East, and tonight a small sliver of hope with the news that Hamas freed 2 elderly Israeli women for humanitarian reasons. The International Committee of the Red Cross confirmed the release, saying, quote, "Our role as a neutral intermediary makes this work possible, and we are ready to facilitate any future release." This is the second group of hostages released by Hamas since the October 7th terrorist attack on Israel. In the meantime, the war rages on, with the Israelis conducting their heaviest airstrike bombardment on Gaza yet. As the death toll rises, Israel is still expected to launch a ground offensive into Gaza. The Israelis also carried out an airstrike on a mosque in the West Bank overnight, claiming Hamas was using that building to plan an upcoming attack. And in Lebanon, the threat from the Iranian-backed militant group Hezbollah is growing. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warns that if the group enters the war, it will be crippled, quote, with a force it cannot imagine. And for more, I want to bring in Israeli government spokesperson Tal Heinrich. Tal, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. A lot to get to. But first, it has been about 2 weeks since Hamas launched its horrific terror attacks on Israel. Talk to us about the impact that has had on Israelis and how life has changed since then.
It has changed significantly, Tracy. It's in fact day 17 since the October 7th massacre, and nobody in Israel is the same. Everyone in this country knows someone who was affected, someone who was killed. Just to remind you, the casualties on the Israeli side, it's 1,400 people were butchered by these barbarians. So everyone knows someone who was killed, who was abducted by Hamas, who was injured. We have thousands of people who were injured. We have 200,000 people who were evacuated within Israel from their communities in the south and in the north, because these are the front lines right now of the global war against terrorism. So the country is not the same. We are still working on trying to identify some of the victims. Some of these bodies are beyond recognition because of what Hamas has done to them.
And Tal, let's talk about that ground offensive that you all are preparing for. Why is that important? What are the challenges there, and why hasn't that taken place yet?
So it is important because, President Biden was here, and he said when he came back to the United States, he delivered an important speech where he said that we are at an inflection point in history, and terrorists can no longer, cannot get away with what they did. Hamas cannot get away with what they've done to Israelis, because if you are soft, if you address terror with weakness, and what they've done here is, it's the worst crime against the Jewish people. These are, war crimes since the Holocaust. So we cannot let them get away with this with impunity, because if we do so, if we send out a message of weakness, we just invite more terror. And it will happen again and again and again. This is why we have to hit Hamas hard, very hard, and reach each and every one of these terrorists. No place is safe for them right now. And send the right message also to our other adversaries across the region. And as for your second question, Israel is a sovereign nation, and our military brass and our government, the unity government that was established during this war, are taking all the considerations and making the decisions. So when the time is right, we will, of course, move to stage 2, stage 3 of the operation. When the time is right, when the conditions are right, of course, we're also working with international partners, as you know, because some of these civilians being held captive by Hamas are also foreign nationals or dual citizenship holders. So we are communicating with international partners, but we will do whatever it takes to dismantle and destroy this organization.
Tal, some people may ask, what is the end game here? So what is it for Israel?
The Israel is to dismantle Hamas. We will dismantle them militarily. They will no longer have military capabilities to hurt us as they did. They will also lack the motivation to hurt us as they did. We will bring down their governance bodies. Hamas will be no longer in the Gaza Strip.
Tal, I want to talk about how you balance all of this and also the humanitarian aspect of that, and also abide by, international humanitarian law. Talk to us about that.
So we are abiding by international law. We are not the aggressors here. We were attacked. We didn't even expect this war, as you know. We were surprised. We were surprised, in fact. We didn't start with this war, and we were dragged to it by Hamas. This is why we're responding right now to their aggression. Of course, we don't want any civilians in harm's way. We don't want Israeli civilians in harm's way, and we don't want Palestinian civilians in harm's way. This is why we have evacuated our population. So many people, again, 200,000 people from communities in the south and communities who reside close to the northern border, the border with Lebanon, where Iran-backed Hezbollah tries to test us. And we hope they don't turn this into a full-fledged war on another front. But we are also calling on the Palestinian civilians to evacuate within Gaza, to move from the northern part of the Strip to the southern part, because the heavy fighting will take place in the north. So the IDF designated special routes for them. We gave them prior notice of 2 days, in fact, prior notice to move to these areas in the south where they have, these are safer havens, and humanitarian aid is also awaiting.
And Tal, we will leave it right there. Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it. God bless.
Thank you, Tracy.
President Joe Biden and Pope Francis both speak about the need for peace in the Middle East. The White House says the two leaders talked on the phone Sunday about the war in Israel and Gaza, and we are learning more about that conversation as White House correspondent Owen Jensen just asked President Biden about it. Owen, so what did the president have to say?
Tracy, good evening to you. First of all, let me set the stage for you a little bit. President Biden here at the White House was giving a speech on Bidenomics today, and right when it was done, I was able to ask him about that phone call with Pope Francis. Now, we're told the phone call lasted about 20 minutes, and here's my interaction with President Biden earlier today.
Pope Francis spoke with you yesterday. You spoke with Pope Francis by phone yesterday?
I did.
How did that conversation impact you? What did you take away from that, the conversation with Pope Francis?
Well, that's just one question. The Pope and I are on the same page. He was very, very interested in what we were doing to deal with some of the crises we're facing, particularly in Israel this time around. And I laid out to him what the game plan was, how we thought we should be providing the kind of assistance to Israel they needed. And the Pope was across the board supportive of what we're doing.
Meanwhile, Israel ramps up its airstrikes in Gaza, the death toll increasing. And in the White House press briefing room today,
we're glad to see the first convoys of humanitarian assistance over the weekend cross the border into Gaza and reach Palestinians in need.
The U.S. advising Israel to delay an expected ground invasion to buy more time to rescue hostages taken by Hamas more than 2 weeks ago. At least 222 people were captured by the terrorists. Just last week, an American woman and her teenage daughter released.
I will tell you that nothing has changed about our focus on those hostages. We're glad we got two back home with their families where they belong last week. We want to get the rest of them out.
And as efforts are made to free the hostages, these posters put up in Tel Aviv showing their faces, the United States ready to protect Americans and U.S. troops in the Middle East should the Israel-Hamas war escalate as expected.
We got to do what we got to do to protect our troops on the ground, particularly in Iraq and Syria. You've seen us add additional military capability to the region.
Now, back to the president today when he's giving that speech. Afterward, another reporter asked him if the U.S. supports a hostages for ceasefire deal. The president responded, "We should have those hostages released and then we can talk." at the White House. Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, after nearly 3 weeks, House Republicans are still on the hunt for a new speaker. They are back to square one after the GOP rejected Congressman Jim Jordan's bid. Until then, the U.S. House remains at a standstill, unable to pass pressing legislation. Republicans are pushing to have a speaker in place by the end of the week.
We are in a very bad position as a party, one that has won the majority, one that America has entrusted us with, that a simple 8 people have put us in this place.
Congress is a lot like high school, but even more so. So hopefully we'll get past this. And, I certainly have been part of the governing majority, and I'm going to stay part of that and look forward to those who are on the fringes hopefully coming together so that we can get a speaker.
9 new GOP lawmakers say they're running for speaker. Republicans are expected to vote on a nominee tomorrow. A speaker in place would allow the House to take up an aid package for Israel and its war against Hamas. On Sunday, a bipartisan group of senators wrapped up a trip to the Middle East.
Hamas doesn't just hate the Jewish people like me. It wants to kill us. Period. Every one of us. The world cannot tolerate that kind of genocide.
You'll never convince me that this is not about reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Israel. The Iranians, through their proxy Hamas, unleashed holy hell on Israel to stop the march toward a better Mideast and a better world.
One of those on the trip, Senate Minority Leader John Thune. He tells EWTN News Nightly that he expects Congress to approve new foreign aid requested by President Biden.
We're fighting terrorism. We're fighting, world powers like China and Russia right now that are Russia clearly invading a sovereign country. And so we have to be prepared to defend America's vital national security interest. And so I think there's going to be good support for some aid package.
Lawmakers say they hope to have that aid package passed by early November, which may also include money for Ukraine, border security, and possibly more. Lawmakers also have to pass a continuing resolution to keep the government open past November 17th. That we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including sorting out the numbers. During the pandemic, the net worth of many U.S. households grew 37%. That is the largest jump on record. So, why do our bank accounts feel so small? We'll ask an economist. And why 10,000 of the faithful flocked to upstate New York this weekend. A new report from the Federal Reserve reveals that median family net worth rose 37% between 2019 and 2022, while mean net worth rose 23% during that same period. Federal stimulus, a hot stock market, rising home values, and a boost in stock prices are all attributed to the increase. To help us unpack this report and tell us what it all really means is Dr. Maria Aguirre, the president and also an economics professor at Catholic Distance University. Dr. Aguirre, great to be with you. Let's talk more about this report. We mentioned the rise in median family net worth, which seems pretty significant. What were some of the other big takeaways or key findings from this report?
Thank you, first of all, for having me here. I'm very happy to be part of your program. And I think that important things to take away here is indeed the income reporting belongs to 2021, not 2022. But if we look at the 2021 numbers, we do see a significant increase. However, the caveat or the missing ingredient is the family structure. When you look at the family structure of the report in terms of family structure, what we see is that the improvements are not evenly distributed. As always, we find we have an increase in income for 2021. However, the single parents with children saw a decline on income by 10%, while married couples with children saw an increase in 10%. So we see that the distribution is not equal. And second, we see good news. The real worth net wealth worth has increased. But again, when we see who beneficiated the most, when we compare a 30% increase for married couples versus a 19% increase to single parents with children, especially single mothers, we see a decline. Also, I think very good news is that in both cases, we do see a significant decline in debt. And that is a combination of several things. During COVID, families did refinance mortgages sometimes or improved their house. And that all contributed to or reduce their debt. But one more time, what we see is that when you look at that, the ones who were managed to decline the debt more significantly were couples with children as opposed to single mothers.
Dr. Aguirre, I want to jump in here really quickly before we run, because we're running out of time, but I want to, if you don't mind, sorry to interrupt, but yeah. I do want to talk about this. I mean, a lot of these findings in many ways seem very good, but I think it's safe to say right now in 2023, a lot of average families and single household families are not feeling really great about the economy. I mean, maybe they're probably paying more for a lot of things. Gas, they're paying more for groceries, rent, mortgages, utilities. So, on paper, this sounds really good, but, it isn't all that rosy, right? And then we have this war in the Middle East, which is concerning a lot of people, especially we're getting close to wintertime and a lot of people heat their homes with oil. So if you don't mind, could you maybe talk about that? Do you think we should brace ourselves for higher oil prices? And what will that mean for consumers?
Correct. I would say two things. One is the reason why we see the pinch is because, in fact, when you look at the 2022 and 2023 actual income levels, it has declined across households. So, in fact, again, this report can be misleading for the income because it's talking about 2021, not 2022 and 2023. But the second thing, the oil prices, everybody expects an increase in oil prices, and that goes down to the gasoline, the heat, and so forth. So indeed, I think we are looking at households feeling the pinch of a decline in income, that is in real income, which is what in fact has happened due to the inflation, and an increase in cost of living across the board, because when the oil increases, all costs increase production, increase on gasoline, increase on heating, increase across the board.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and breaking this all down for us. We really appreciate it. God bless you.
Thank you.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, cause for concern. A bishop in the UK has a dire warning about the sacrament of holy matrimony. Plus, Pope Francis gives Catholics advice on how to balance our daily lives in a world run by politics. A church leader in England has issued a stark warning about the future of marriage. The Bishop of Shrewsbury says marriage is at risk of, quote, being eradicated altogether. Speaking to a group of married couples, Bishop Mark Davies cited a 61% decrease of the number of marriages in the UK. That is the lowest number in 2 decades. More than 8,000 people, including several leading Catholic voices, gathered in a small town in upstate New York over the weekend. The New York State Eucharistic Congress was a 40-hour event at the Shrine of Our Lady of the Martyrs in Orisville, New York. Speakers included Cardinal Timothy Dolan, Supreme Knight Patrick Kelly from the Knights of Columbus, and Bishop Joseph S. Payette, the youngest bishop in the United States. And we go now to one of the participants, Catherine Jean Lopez, Senior Fellow at the National Review Institute. Catherine Jean, great to be with you as always. Tell us about this Eucharistic Congress that took place over the past weekend, and what were some of the highlights?
Well, it was truly amazing. I'm on the board of the Shrine of Our Lady of the Martyrs up there, and it was so amazing to see 8,500 people was the final count on those holy grounds where 3 of the Jesuit martyrs were brutally murdered, trying to bring the gospel, trying to bring Jesus in the Eucharist. to the Native Americans who lived there. And Isaac Jogues, as many who are watching may know, when his fingers were mutilated, he wound up going back to France, petitioning to the Pope to have permission to celebrate Mass even without his fingers, critical fingers, the thumb and the index finger. And he went back. He went back and ultimately died on these beautiful holy grounds. 10 years later, St. Kateri Tekakwitha was born there. It's a really amazing holy place where Christ is always present, but this weekend, having the Eucharistic Lord being processed around the grounds by many priests, many bishops, and so many pious people, and they ran the gamut too, which was so beautiful. Actually, Tracy, besides seeing Jesus walking, being processed around the grounds, one of the great blessings of being on the board of the shrine is I was behind the scenes, and there was a collection taken, as collections are taken at Mass, and to help support the shrine. And there was an envelope, and it said 1.00 pesos, and it was $1 in coins. So that was the widow's mite of some family that came up there, and that was just so humbling. My eyes, welled up as I saw that, because people love Jesus so much. They will not only make the sacrifice to go to the middle of nowhere, New York State, honestly, but also to give an offering to glorify our Lord.
Yeah. Catherine, I have to say, I can just tell how moved you were to be there and how much that meant to you. I'm sure others as well. Tell us a little bit about that and why this initiative on the Eucharist and Adoration, why it's so needed right now.
Well, this was the New York participation in the run-up to next summer's Eucharistic revival in Indianapolis. And, I had a little book signing while I was there for my book, A Year with the Mystics. And I really loved that because I was able to set up a table. And even if people didn't buy books, they had conversations with me, some who knew me from various media or people who just wanted to talk. And so many people said to me, what's happening to our world, and their participation in being a solution to Ukraine, to Israel, to us not having a Speaker of the House and our future presidential election, all of the madness, even their own children who they're praying back into the church or whatever it is, they felt like they were doing something, and realizing that we can rely on Christ. And I know, even personally, a couple of things happened there that were just clear signs to me that God was telling me in my little trip up there from New York City, trust me more, and come to me more. And that's why this Eucharistic revival is so important, because we so often live as practical atheists. We try to be our own saviors and saviors for the people in our lives. But we obviously need to do our work, but rely on God. He's a faithful God who has made these awesome promises and comes to us in the Eucharist every day.
Catherine Jean, thank you so much. And we needed to hear this message today. So great to have you on, and thank you so much. God bless you.
God bless you.
Pope Francis reminds the faithful that we all belong to the Lord and not an earthly power.
Rendete dunque a Cesare quello che è di Cesare e a Dio quello che è di Dio.
During a Sunday address at the Vatican, the Holy Father emphasized the correct relationship between church and state, saying that faith and daily life are intertwined. He said the things of this world belong to Caesar, but man and the world itself belong to God. And just a reminder, the EWTN is providing live coverage from the Synod on Synodality. The 45-minute broadcast from the Vatican starts at 5 p.m. Eastern, and it will feature news analysis plus exclusive interviews with church leaders and Synod participants. So do not miss it. And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night, and God bless.